The galaxy had always believed in hierarchy, not as a written law, but as a quiet certainty passed from one ancient civilization to the next. Older meant wiser, larger meant stronger. Those who reached the stars first assumed the right to decide the fate of those who arrived later. Humanity arrived late, emerging from its small yellow star with imperfect ships, fragile bodies, and minds that burned bright and fast before fading. The great empires noticed Earth only long enough to measure it. Among them, the Varelian, compact, beings of crystal lattice, bodies and millennia long. Lifespans ran their projections and reached a simple conclusion. Humans were weak, short-lived, emotionally unstable, useful only as labor or data points. When the first contact summit was convened above a neutral gas giant, the compact spoke with calm certainty, explaining integration as if it were mercy. Earth would be absorbed, its resources optimized, its culture streamlined until inefficiencies were removed. Humanity listened in silence. They did not rage or threaten. They asked questions, took notes, and returned home carrying something heavier than fear: clarity. Across human worlds, life continued under subtle pressure. Trade routes narrowed, permissions vanished. Observation fleets lingered at the edges of systems like patient predators. The compact expected panic, division, and eventual compliance. What they saw instead confused them. Humans argued yes, but they also built. They repaired failing habitats instead of abandoning them. They shared medical breakthroughs freely, even with species the compact had deemed unworthy of investment. They returned to worlds the galaxy had written off as dead and tried again and again to heal them. To the Varelians, this behavior was illogical. Broken systems were meant to be discarded. Wasted effort was inefficient. And yet, wherever humans went, stability followed slowly, stubbornly, like grass pushing through stone. The shift did not announce itself with war. It unfolded quietly, almost invisibly, through thousands of small acts. On a fractured moon with a collapsing core, human engineers chose not to strip mine and leave, but to listen, mapping stresses and flows, redistributing forces rather than fighting them. Years passed, and the moon stabilized. Then it breathed. An atmosphere thickened. Life emerged. Refugees arrived. Species displaced by compact expansion who had nowhere else to go. Humans did not demand loyalty or tribute. They asked for help, for hands, for ideas. The compact's analysts watched with growing unease as these reclaimed worlds multiplied. Each one became a node of cooperation rather than control, a place where energy, food, and protection were shared. When the compact finally dispatched a containment fleet to restore order, it expected surrender. Instead, it found humans standing openly on the surface of one such world, unarmed, surrounded not by warships but by vessels of dozens of species, transports, hospitals, construction rigs. The Varelian chancellor addressed them with cold logic, warning that resistance was unsustainable. The human reply was calm, almost gentle. Maybe so, but they would try anyway. Then the impossible happened. The planet itself responded, its stabilized core acting as an anchor, redistributing gravitational forces across the system. The fleet's perfect formations unraveled without a single weapon fired. Energy flowed where it was needed, guided by networks humans had built together with others. Order was not destroyed, it was replaced by something the compact had never modeled: cooperation without dominance. From the Varelian perspective, this was deeply unsettling. Their civilization had endured because it eliminated uncertainty. Every variable was predicted, every outcome optimized. Humanity introduced a variable that refused to settle. Humans failed constantly, but they learned. They lost worlds, but they mourned and rebuilt. They bonded fiercely, not just with their own kind, but with anyone willing to stand beside them. Where the compact saw weakness, humans found reason to protect. Where others saw hopelessness, humans saw a challenge worth accepting simply because it mattered. As the containment fleet withdrew, not destroyed but rendered irrelevant, the Chancellor experienced something new, not fear, but humility. The realization that strength was not solely the product of age, numbers, or precision. It could emerge from empathy, from the refusal to abandon what was broken, from the stubborn belief that tomorrow could be better, even when every model said it would not. In the cycles that followed, borders softened. The compact slowed its expansion, not out of defeat, but understanding. Worlds once dismissed were reevaluated. Species once ignored were heard. Humanity did not rule the galaxy. It did not need to. Its presence alone altered the equation. proving that survival did not require domination. Only connection and effort sustained over time. In the end, the galaxy did not remember humanity for its weapons or its ships, though both improved. It remembered Earth for its will, the quiet, relentless determination to lift rather than crush, to mend rather than discard. Humans remained fragile, emotional, and brief sparks against cosmic time, but they burned brightly enough to change the darkness around them. Empires that had lasted for ages found themselves adapting, learning to coexist with a species that refused to fit neatly into any hierarchy. And when future civilizations rose and reached for the stars, they would hear the story of the latecomers who were called weak and proved otherwise, not by conquering the galaxy, but by refusing to give up on it. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. Time did not slow after that realization. If anything, it accelerated. The ripples of humanity's defiance moved outward through trade, lanes, and cultural exchanges, carried not by fleets of conquest but by stories, by travelers, by data shared freely instead of hoarded. Minor powers that had once aligned themselves with the compact, out of fear, began to reassess their loyalties. Some withdrew quietly, others approached human-led coalitions cautiously, expecting demands or hidden costs. They found none. Humans asked only for honesty, effort, and a willingness to stand together when pressure came. This confused older species more than open hostility ever could. To them, alliances were contracts enforced by threat. Cooperation without coercion felt dangerously unstable, and yet it worked. Systems linked themselves through shared infrastructure that could reroute energy during disasters, redistribute food during famine, and shelter populations when stars flared or wars broke out elsewhere. These networks did not replace governments. They reinforced them, giving even the smallest worlds a voice and a safety net. The Compact observed all of this with growing discomfort. Their predictive engines, vast structures older than human civilization, returned increasingly uncertain results whenever humanity was factored in. Outcomes diverged wildly. Probability curves flattened. Entire futures became unreadable. For a culture that equated control with survival, this uncertainty was terrifying. Still, there was no obvious enemy to strike. Humans did not expand aggressively. They did not seize compact territory. They simply made the galaxy harder to dominate. When a distant system collapsed into chaos, after a failed resource extraction by another empire, humans arrived with medics and engineers before diplomats or soldiers. They stayed long after the crisis passed. The people of that system remembered who had helped them breathe again, who had rebuilt their homes, who had listened. Loyalty, the Compact slowly realized, was forming organically, and it was forming around humanity, not because humans were perfect, but because they were present. Because they stayed when things were hardest. Because they treated survival as a shared burden instead of a competition. For the first time in its history, the Compact faced a truth it could not refute. The galaxy was changing not through force, but through example. The final shift came generations later, long after the humans who had stood unarmed before the containment fleet were gone, their lives brief flickers compared to crystal-bound immortals. A stellar catastrophe erupted at the edge of compact space, a chain reaction of collapsing stars that threatened dozens of inhabited systems. The Compact's calculations were swift and merciless. Resources could not save everyone. Worlds would have to be sacrificed to preserve the core. Orders were prepared. Then the human networks activated without waiting for permission. Energy flowed across borders that had once been rigid lines. Evacuation corridors opened through stabilized jump paths humans had spent decades reinforcing. Worlds that should have fallen silent did not. Billions survived who should not have, according to every model the Compact possessed. When the crisis ended, the High Assembly convened in a chamber that had not hosted true debate in millennia. The question before them was simple and profound: continue as they were, or change. Records from human archives were presented, not as propaganda, but as history. Failures alongside successes, wars alongside acts of mercy, proof that humanity was not noble by nature, but by choice, again and again. In moments when it mattered, the vote that followed shattered precedent. The Compact would no longer expand through absorption. It would participate. It would cooperate. It would accept uncertainty as the cost of a living galaxy. In the cycles that followed, young species grew up hearing not just of ancient empires, but of humans, short-lived beings who refused to accept that weakness defined worth. And somewhere among the stars, unrestored worlds and shared stations, People of countless kinds told the same quiet truth to their children, that the galaxy was vast and dangerous, but it could be kinder than it once was, because one small species had decided that lifting others was the strongest act of all.